The sun had not yet fully risen when the old pickup truck's engine began to rumble at the entrance of the construction site. The red soil stirred up a fine dust that blended with the dry air of Tanghin-Dassouri, a community forgotten by many, but where the future of Burkina Faso was on the line. He arrived before anyone else. Wearing worn-out boots and a faded cap pulled low over his eyes, he looked like just another laborer. He carried a clipboard, took short notes, and walked slowly among the rubble and metal structures, as if seeing what no one else did. The name he used was simple, Issa, and there, among concrete and silence, no one imagined who he really was. The others called him boss, with a mix of respect and unease, not because of authority, but because of his gaze. It wasn't harsh, but it wasn't soft either. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words came out sharp, like a blade. To the foreign construction firm, he was just a local inspector, a low-level bureaucrat, poor and powerless, assigned by some faraway ministry. He wore no official uniform, carried no weapon, and didn't raise his voice. But there was something in his demeanor, the way he noticed details, the way he asked simple questions with calculated pauses, that made the more observant ones uneasy. That morning, the armored vehicles arrived covered in dust, and the European executives tried not to step on the packed earth. One of the drivers muttered in French as he watched them hesitate. "Ils croient qu'ils achètent tout." Issa didn't respond. He just noted the time of arrival and returned to his post in the narrow shade of a makeshift container. His eyes briefly met those of the company's chief engineer, a Frenchman in a light blazer, his shoes sinking into the mud. Just a second, but in that glance was a silent promise. This would not be easy or cheap. The man leading the delegation was named Marc Delatour, in his 50s, with a tan shaped by European sun and a voice trained in boardrooms overlooking the Seine. His posture was that of a man used to finding fertile ground for business, even in the Sahel. "Mr. Issa, correct?" he asked with a polite smile but eyes that scanned the man in front of him like he was calculating the cost of a tool. "Yes," Issa replied without offering his hand. Delatour hesitated for a moment, then turned to his colleagues with a subtle, nearly invisible smirk, as if to say, "They're all like this." He pulled out a leather folder and laid out documents on an improvised table. "We have here the updated plans for the logistics center. We included some adjustments that we consider strategic." The word hung in the air, loaded with ambiguity. Issa flipped through the papers slowly. His eyebrows shifted a millimeter when he saw the tripled budget, hidden among technical charts and legal English jargon. He closed the folder calmly. "This is not what was agreed upon," he said in a neutral tone. "With all due respect," Delatour leaned in, lowering his voice as if speaking to a child, "we understand the local realities. We know how certain conveniences can be useful to speed up the process." One of the African engineers, sitting further back, crossed his arms in silence. The interpreter hesitated before translating. Delatour chuckled softly. "No need to translate. He understands French, doesn't he? Everyone here understands the language of money." His colleagues gave a faint, polite laugh. Issa remained unmoved. He took a simple pen from his shirt pocket and scribbled something in the corner of the folder. "I need 48 hours to evaluate, and you must submit formal justifications for the cost increase." Delatour's smile faded for a second. "I thought we could handle this between us, Mr. Issa. No need to involve higher levels." He discreetly pushed a thick brown envelope across the table, heavy with rounded edges. Issa didn't touch it. "Are you trying to buy me, Mr. Delatour? I'm trying to make things easier for you and for us." The tone was dry now. "A man like you surely understands how the game is played." Silence. The afternoon heat made the weight of the words even heavier. A group of workers watched from a distance, pretending to sweep the ground, mixing curiosity with caution. The African engineer cleared his throat, uneasy. The envelope still sat there, an open trap, in the middle of the table. Issa stood up slowly, looked at the envelope, then at Delatour. "I'll include this in the report," he said simply. "You're making a mistake," Delatour replied coldly. "We're the ones in charge here. We've always been welcome." Issa smiled, for the first time, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Times have changed, monsieur." Delatour didn't reply, but his expression made it clear. He still hadn't realized who he was dealing with. The next day, the heat felt heavier. The sky, thick with clouds, pressed down over the scaffolding and warehouses. The red dust clung to the eye skin, a constant reminder of where they were. Delatour arrived with fewer smiles. This time he brought a new consultant, a tall white man in dark glasses who didn't introduce himself, only observed as if sniffing the air. "Where's the inspector?" Delatour asked one of the workers. "In the supply shed," the young man replied, hesitantly pointing. Delatour marched there without waiting. He pushed the wooden door open roughly. Issa was standing inside, back turned, checking supplies. He turned calmly when he heard the noise. "You haven't responded." "To our revised budget," Delatour said, his voice no longer diplomatic. It was sharp, impatient. "As I said, it's under review, and about yesterday's envelope." Delatour cut him off with a gesture. "Let's stop this theater," he said, glancing at the consultant beside him as if signaling something. "Listen closely, Issa. This center depends on us. Without our company, this turns to dust and empty promises. You're just an employee, a number, easily replaced, understand?" The shed door was open. Outside, 2 workers had stopped unloading cement. One held a sack on his shoulder, frozen. The other pretended to look at his phone, but was quietly recording. Issa crossed his arms, looked Delatour in the eye. "Are you finished?" Delatour laughed, disbelieving. "You have no idea who you're challenging." "Neither do you." There was a pause. The consultant stepped forward. Delatour raised his finger like an impatient teacher. "I've seen many like you, men who think they're heroes but end up fired, discredited, or worse." It was then that Issa stepped forward. He didn't threaten, didn't raise his voice. "Tell me something, Mr. Delatour. Have you ever visited Dori, Kaya, Bobo Dioulasso?" "What?" "Cities in my country. Places where people walk 10 kilometers for water, where every brick of this project means one less child on the street. You're trying to sell overpriced concrete to people who bleed for every penny." Delatour said nothing. Outside, a radio was turned off. More people stopped. The African engineer appeared silently at the door. "You can keep trying to intimidate me," Issa continued. "You can threaten, laugh, hand out envelopes. But I won't leave. I won't back down. And above all, I won't forget." Delatour scoffed and turned his back. The consultant hesitated. Something had clearly broken. Not the tone, which remained calm, but the perception. The surrounding silence was new, almost reverent. As they left, the African engineer whispered, "That man, he's not just an inspector." Issa remained still, eyes fixed on the horizon. A truck passed, kicking up dust, and the truth still hidden seemed to wait quietly for the right moment to rise. 2 days later, the construction site buzzed under a cloudless sky. The machines were off. Workers scattered in the shade of the trucks, pretending to work while whispering among themselves. A short video recorded by one of the workers had quietly circulated overnight. Just a brief clip, but enough to raise suspicions. That Friday morning, something changed. An unmarked black pickup truck entered the main gate, escorted by 2 military vehicles, no sirens, silent, direct. Soldiers got out first, firm but not with weapons drawn. Then a man stepped out of the central car. He wore a traditional white Burkinabe outfit, embroidered in gold around the collar. He walked with the calm of someone familiar with the land and the heat. Everyone turned to look, even the engineers. Delatour emerged from the makeshift office, adjusting his jacket, irritated by the interruption. When he saw the soldiers, his face hardened, though he kept a diplomatic tone. "Good morning, gentlemen. May I ask the reason for this presence?" One of the soldiers simply pointed to the man in white, who continued walking toward the storage area. He stopped in front of Issa, who stood beside the container with his clipboard in hand, just like the previous days. They greeted each other with a formal gesture, not a handshake, but a respectful touch to the chest and a mon frère. Silence spread like wildfire. The man in white turned to face the onlookers. A second later, one of the soldiers pulled out an envelope and read aloud, "By order of the Presidency of Burkina Faso, Mr. Issa Ouedraogo, Special Inspector of the Office of President Ibrahim Traoré, has concluded an investigation into irregularities in this project. The company, GMI France, is hereby suspended. Its representatives are to be detained for questioning regarding bribery and contractual fraud." Delatour went pale. The crowd stepped back slightly. The consultant tried to speak, but 2 soldiers were already surrounding him. "This is absurd," Delatour exclaimed, turning to Issa. "You lied to everyone, pretended to be a common worker." Issa took a deep breath, then spoke clearly. Not to Delatour, but to everyone there. I never pretended. I never said I was less than I am. You just never looked closely. He handed his clipboard to a nearby soldier and walked to the center of the yard. Now all the workers were watching him in silence, some wide-eyed, others hiding quiet smiles. I worked alongside you because I wanted to see with my own eyes. I wanted to feel the weight of the earth, hear the sounds, witness how the people's money is being buried under lies and overpriced cement. Now the people will know. Delatour tried to protest again, but was silenced by a soldier's gesture. The handcuffs glinted under the midday sun. From atop a cement mixer, a young worker shouted, "C'est notre frère." The response rose like a whisper that grew. Shy applause, then firm clapping, and finally a rising wave, not of celebration but of recognition. The mask had fallen. The man they called boss was actually the guardian of justice. Issa lifted his face to the sky, closed his eyes for a moment, then stepped down into the yard, all eyes on him. He didn't need to say anything else. His presence was now a symbol. And symbols don't shout, they simply exist, and change everything around them. That same afternoon, the videos began to spread. First through the workers' WhatsApp groups, then on local Facebook pages. Within 2 hours, the image of Issa, standing before the crowd as the foreign executives were escorted away by soldiers, was on screens across the country. In Ouagadougou, students chanted his name at universities. On the radio, presenters interrupted programs to comment, he was there, among them, ate the same rice, walked in the same dust, and no one knew. Social media exploded. Issa Ouedraogo became a trending topic across Francophone Africa. Journalists rushed to Tanghin-Dassouri to interview workers. One of them, eyes full of tears, said, "He listened. He asked questions. He never looked down on anyone. Only the foreigners didn't." Notice, that night on national television, President Ibrahim Traoré appeared beside Issa. Few words, steady gaze. We are entering a new era, and it begins with respect for our people. Corruption will not only be fought, it will be exposed, even if it hides behind contracts, numbers, or diplomatic passports. GMI France was banned from all public bids in Burkina Faso. The case was handed over to the Economic Crimes Tribunal and drew attention from international agencies. A parallel investigation uncovered links to politicians from the former regime, now also facing warrants. But change didn't stop at the top. In the following days, other inspectors started acting with more confidence. Bricklayers and helpers spoke more freely. Market women mentioned Issa's name as an example to their children. In schools, teachers showed clips of the video as a lesson in citizenship. Back at the construction site, the dust settled slowly. A new group of local engineers took charge, now under direct supervision from the presidential office. In a symbolic gesture, the former GMI meeting room was transformed into a break area for workers. On the wall, a simple wooden plaque read, "So the people are never invisible again." Issa declined interviews. He never returned to Tanghin-Dassouri after the operation, but in a rare written statement sent to the press, he left a message that marked the country. "It's not about who I am, it's not about my title or my name. It's about what you still see when you look at a black man, a poor man, a worker, in simple clothes. It's about the arrogance of those who think money can buy silence. It's about the strength of a people who have learned to observe in silence and to remember with clarity. And above all, it's about the end of an era where the people were treated as if they weren't even in the room, because now we are, and we're not leaving." The words swept across the country like wind over dry fields. There was no rhetoric, no forced heroism, just truth. In the days that followed, in markets, town squares, and gathering halls, one phrase kept echoing, spoken by an old worker on the side of the road. "When the people wear silence, no one hears. But when silence wears the people, even the walls begin to tremble." And so, on that dusty afternoon filled with scandal and dignity, Burkina Faso learned, and taught, that respect for the people is not a favor. It is the foundation of everything.